Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar about preventing e-cig or vape use among youth. I am Abby Stoika. I'm the Associate Director of the Western Region Public Health Training Center, which is one of 10 public health training centers funded by HRSA to support the public health workforce. And I am here with Wayne Tormala.
Got it.
From the Arizona Department of Health Services, Bureau of Tobacco and Chronic Disease. So we have today's webinar approved for continuing nursing education for nurses and continuing education contact hours for CHES. The learning objectives of this webinar are to describe current data use and trends regarding e-cig vape use, to describe youth attitudes and behaviors as reported in youth focus groups, to discuss components of effective tobacco control communication strategies targeting youth, to describe ways public health programs can incorporate effective tobacco control communication strategies, and lastly, to identify strategies to influence peer messaging around vaping. There are no financial relationships to disclose. And if you are interested in receiving continuing nursing education for this webinar, you will need to be present for the full duration of the webinar and to complete an online nursing evaluation form. This link is written on our Moodle site, so when you do close the webinar window, you'll be able to access it from that page as well. Okay, so let's start.
Okay, thank you, Abby. I'm happy to be here and present an overview of what we're doing in Arizona to combat vape use among youth. So we're going to set the stage, first of all. So with the FDA, as many of you know, they've been addressing the unprecedented increase in vaping among youth and focusing on regulating vape manufacturers and retailers. So in the fall of 2018, not that long ago, FDA gave manufacturers and retailers 60 days to prove they can keep vape away from minors. Now, the major concern about vaping, according to the FDA, was that often vaping hooks teens on nicotine who have never smoked. The developing adolescent brain is particularly vulnerable to addiction to nicotine. Most vape products contain nicotine, often in large concentrations, and other hazardous materials, and they're marketed in colors and flavors and images that attract use. So setting the stage, FDA was sort of one leg of the stool. The next leg of the stool, of course, is that CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, came in, identified vaping among youth as a major public health concern. So the direct health hazard to youth through using and being exposed was a concern of CDC. Most vape products contain and emit numerous toxic substances, including actual metals and metal concentrations, and vape products often have not have been approved as tobacco cessation products. So the Surgeon General, this is sort of the third leg of the national stool, I'll call it for now, came out not that long ago and really declared that vaping among youth is a national epidemic. And we had the rare opportunity recently of spending 60 minutes with the Surgeon General, where I was able to talk about what we're doing here in Arizona to combat vape among youth. And the Surgeon General was certainly saying, and we certainly agree with this, that the epidemic is climbing so rapidly that we really have no idea how big it is right now. We know that based on last surveys, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next hour or so, what the surveys have told us about vape use here in Arizona, but we're taking guesses as where it is because it's climbing so steeply. So the Surgeon General, Dr. Adams, was saying, that this is the #1 priority among youth. So here at the Arizona Department of Health Services, we were delighted to see FDA, CDC, and the Surgeon General sort of make these major declarations within the last year or so. We've been working for the past couple of years doing our formative research around vape use, looking at focus groups and getting what kind of messaging we want to get out there, putting messaging in the hands of youth, doing peer-to-peer approaches and things like that. So what we found in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 2015 and 17, you can see on the slide, when you talk about teens who have ever used an electronic vapor product among high school youth, that slightly over 50% in both those surveys, 2015 and 2017, had self-reported that they had used a vape product at least once. You can go to the next slide. And then the frequent use of electronic vapor products among high school youth in those 2 years, of course, was way down, 3 and 5% basically in Arizona. And in 2017, climbing quite higher than the national average. So daily use of electronic vapor products among high school youth in these years, again, was looking at low percentages, 1.6 and then 3.7, so more than double in the next 2 years. And we are estimating right now that daily use has multiplied several times since 2017. So Arizona trends. And so while we've been quite successful here in Arizona reducing tobacco use among youth, and we're reporting in our YRBS now that it's an all-time low of 14%. Just a few years ago, it was as high as 14 and 15%. That's in reverse trends to the vape use. So as the tobacco use is going down, vape uses are going up. So right now we're looking at 50% of youth reporting vaping at least once, 30% of vapes in the past 30 days, and up to about 20% currently used on a nearly daily basis. And that translates into over 90,000 youth in Arizona between the ages of 12 and 17 are using on a nearly daily basis. So it's a major public health issue. It's a major epidemic here in Arizona. So we also know that males vape at higher rates than females. Older teens vape more than younger ones. The white youth vape more than Latinos and African Americans, and that 97% of the vape products tested at the state lab contain high levels of nicotine. What we're doing there is when school districts are confiscating vape products from youth during the school, the Attorney General's office is collecting those and bringing them to our state lab, and we're testing them. We've been testing them for nicotine to see this sort of truth in advertising and to get a demythifying the beliefs among youth that vaping is harmless, that it's just a water vapor. We find that 97% of vape products tested in our state lab contain high levels of nicotine. And I would note now that we're currently testing for chemicals other than nicotine in vape products. So looking at metals, things like nickel, carcinogens, and so we're looking at going deeper into that testing. So we've sort of demythified that they don't contain a lot of nicotine, and now we're looking at the other products. So we can establish here at local messaging levels in Arizona that vape products can be quite hazardous to youth who still have a developing brain and where it can be a gateway to other addictions.
Is there something that compares those nicotine levels to the levels in cigarettes?
Yeah, well, where they compare is that the vape products are being used in much higher intensity than cigarettes. And so while a cigarette will contain a lot of nicotine compared to maybe one hit or two of vaping products, the teens are using their vapes much more often. So the consumption is much deeper to the point, and we'll see in a future slide that they're actually using vape right in class because they're exhaling into the shirt, into the backpack, and things like that. So what we don't know is what does short-term success look like? We shared this with the Attorney General, Dr. Adams, and he certainly agrees with us that with the epidemic climbing so rapidly and so steeply, that what is our goal? Where do we set our goal? We know that in tobacco use, for example, if we want to set a goal at under 10% prevalence, we can aim for that now because tobacco use has been fairly stabilized. But the success in reducing vape use among youth, does that mean that by a year from now, 40% are using regularly instead of maybe 60%? We just don't know where the end state is. We don't know at what level does vape use, does it stabilize and begin to reduce? And so we're being very aggressive on this campaign. So the Arizona Department of Health Services declared that vaping among youth is a top priority in addressing the health of youth in Arizona. And I would say that the trifecta of the FDA, CDC, and the Surgeon General coming out and being very strong on the use of vape among youth has certainly helped pave the way for us being very aggressive in Arizona. Because before you ever launch a major social marketing campaign across the state like we're doing right now, you have to have your governing body behind you. You have to really know that it's being receptive in the local levels, at the political, social, and economic levels. And so certainly, even though we were working on this campaign, doing our research before FDA, CDC, and the Surgeon General came out and vocalized their strong support of that, we were able to pivot on those messages and really get a lot of more political receptivity during a major campaign here in Arizona. So facts over flavor, we're calling that, that's the name of our campaign, and this kind of speaks for itself, looking at demythifying the fact that even though vape products are being marketed in attractive odors and attractive packaging and sexy symbols and lights go on when you use them and they're very attractive to folks, that the facts beneath that are what we're mostly concerned about when it comes to youth using vape products. So our campaign overview of Facts Over Flavor, we launched on December 31st, not that long ago. Just a few months ago, we're focusing on young people ages 9 to 13, trying to get a before initiation, getting that mindset early on. And based on formative research, including a review of national practices and focus groups comprised of Arizona youth who vape, we're forming our messages around that. And so like we try to do every time we launch a major social marketing campaign, we try to go right to the audience that we're trying to have an impact in terms of attitude and behavioral change and learn from them. What kinds of messages resonate, what kinds of messages get rejected, who do they listen to, who are the trusted messengers, how do we get to folks with our messaging? So our findings in our formative research, that many youth and their parents believe that vaping is harmless. The youth report that everybody is vaping and they call it juuling in our school, and we find that even the nomenclature of vaping changes so rapidly right now that when we get into a marketing campaign and develop ads and we go through our final edits and we get them approved by the governor's office, et cetera, that already the nomenclatures might be changing. And certainly the vaping products that are out there are changing. So youth tell us that it's even right in the classroom and that bathrooms in the high schools are commonly known as vape rooms. So we know that vape is a social lubricant. It's a conversation starter. It helps ease social anxiety. Using vape, the flavors and devices can be very appealing. Looks cool. It's easier to show off. There's competitive smoke tricks that you can do with vape, and often leads to people competing online. And so the social contagion factor, in addition to the addiction part of nicotine, is a very heavy factor that we take into consideration. So countering the prevailing beliefs about vape, meet them where they're at. So in any of our social marketing, whether we're looking at our chronic disease programs or we're looking at tobacco use among adults, meeting them where they're at, where do they get their messaging? Who are the influencers in their lives? Are they peers, most likely? Parents are certainly not public health officials in neckties like myself. I don't have much to say to youth that they're going to resonate with, because they see me as, of course, you're going to talk like that. And I'm sort of paid to talk like that. So we're looking at, how do we get the messaging? How do we connect? And so it makes a difference. So communicating through trusted messengers. So we have a statewide coalition here in Arizona called Students Taking a New Direction, or STAND. And we currently have 36 youth coalitions across the state in virtually every county of Arizona, on the ground working these issues for us. So it's a peer-to-peer approach. Who do youth listen to? Who are their influencers? More than the teacher, more than the parent, more than the public health official, it's each other. So getting the message through trusted messengers. Enforcing the legality without criminalizing. So coordinating with the Attorney General's office and conducting surveillance of illegal sales and vape products to youth. So in addition to looking at illegal sales to tobacco products across the state, that we coordinate with the Attorney General's office in terms of finding those retailers that are selling to youth and clamping down on that, we're also including purchase of vape products under 18 years of age. So talking to youth about quitting. So from the national best practices, we certainly align with that. We know that most, as I've said already, most youth use the term juuling, and many do not even consider juuling as vaping. It's already vaping as passé. We're juuling, and that's safer. according to the youth. They do not buy into the health consequences argument as a reason to quit. So that's much later on. So yeah, I know it might be unhealthy for me now, but I'm going to quit by the time I'm 18. Much like attitudes that we see in tobacco use and other products. They're not necessarily responsive to the nicotine addiction argument. We always include the nicotine addiction argument in our messaging, but we know that telling kids that you're going to be addicted to this doesn't always take. They don't always believe it. They don't feel like they're addicted. And they want clear reasons why they should not vape. So what are immediate health hazards? So maybe the messaging should take on not just later on you'll be smoking, or later on you'll be addicted to nicotine, and that can be damaging in the long run, but they want to know clear reasons why they should not vape. What's happening in my lungs right now as I vape? If there are products like metals and carcinogens in vaping, and that's coating my lungs, or that we have fears about that. And also the fear of being controlled. So the immediate hazard of like, okay, now I'm using a product that's not only expensive and illegal, but it's beginning to control my life. So when we talk to teens, we find that they're not so much the cosmetic approach anymore, because it used to be who wants to kiss a smoker, that's a dirty habit. We find that youth these days don't resonate so much to that messaging as they might to who's controlling my life. So our goals in Facts Over Flavor are to educate youth and provide guidance to parents on the dangers, immediate and long-term, of vape product use, and to prevent the initiation of vape consumption among middle school children. So we know that just like tobacco, the average initiation age in Arizona is between 12 and 13 years old. So how do we cut into that? How do we get youth to not take that first effort? So a new approach to media we've developed based on CDC best practices and designed within the context of today's youth communications and media consumption habits. So one issue, and I think that other states might find this, that you deal with, that even though we're investing a lot of resources into Facts Over Flavor and reducing and preventing vape use among youth, the typical adult out there has no idea what we're doing unless they're on the same social media sites where we're reaching youth. So it used to be historically that everything was on television and the main network channels. So everybody knew what we were doing with youth. Right now, we'll often get questions in public like, well, what are you doing about youth? You know, we have this big vape thing. What are you doing about youth and smoking? Seems like you're kind of asleep at the wheel, when in fact, we might be investing several hundreds of thousands of dollars in getting activating groups around the state on behalf of this campaign. But it's happening on Snapchat, it's happening on Facebook and Twitter, it's happening in youth to youth where kids hang out. So it's happening in venues where adults don't inhabit. And so you've got this issue of you wanting to message to the general public that we are on top of this, we're trying our best to cut into this epidemic, but at the same time, you need to devote most of your resources to the same communication channels that youth are using. That's where you reach them. So meeting youth where they're at, digital platforms dominate the teens' time. TV remains strong in its ability to reach a mass audience, but digital strategies must be prioritized if we really want to target our efforts. And so the Facts Over Flavor campaign generates new messages at the pace in which they consume content. So we know, for example, that many youth spend several hours a day on their social media devices. And so if we can flood that market with our messaging, we're getting a lot of content to youth, not only in the kinds of messaging that they respond to, but in the communication channels. I think you just fast forward to several slides. Okay, so there you go. The next slide, campaign strategies. So we're using 4 different strategic communications approaches to preventing youth from initiating vapor consumption. One is addiction. So even though we know that the message of addiction is predictable, that youth know we're going to come out with that message, and therefore it's been deemed across the country in many venues, if that's all you're doing, you may not be reaching youth because they understand that you're going to come at them with that message. That we still feel that we have an obligation to let them know that through nicotine, there is an addiction factor here. There's some research that's come out of Stanford, for example, that the degree to which your self-esteem is tied into your behavior, that efforts to get you to change that behavior are often met with increasing that very behavior. So in other words, if I'm proud to be a smoker, if I'm proud to be using vape products, and I just come at you with like, you shouldn't be doing it, we don't want you to do that, then that becomes an opportunity to stand up for what, for your rights, it's, freedom to smoke, freedom to vape, that kind of thing. So knowing that a lot of behaviors are clustered, whether it's tobacco or vape, oftentimes there's a lot of social cohesion and social reinforcement around those behaviors. So if you're just coming at them from one angle about, smoking's bad for you, vaping among youth is probably bad for you, then they oftentimes, people use that opportunity as a time to like stand up for their behavior. So it's like, it's my right to smoke, it's my right to vape, and feel good about combating that argument. So you have to, I think, even though we think we know what's right, we really have to be fed our messaging from the audience that we're trying to reach, and be aware of that just combating behavior and attitude straight on doesn't always work. So negative health effects, certainly, especially, like I said, if we're talking about more immediate health effects, you'll see when we come to some examples of some of the ads that we've run, looking at the brain, the fact that up to age even 25, our brain is still being developed. So anything that sort of interferes with that can have some lasting effects. The gateway approach that we know from research that teens who vape are 4 times likely to start smoking at some point. So looking at that. And then the youth empowerment, looking at, being liberated, being free of addiction, free of having to go out and buy these products day in and day out, and free to be you, even though sometimes maybe your peers are putting a lot of pressure on you to engage in this case, vaping. So campaign strategy number 1, addiction, addresses the fact that many vape products contain nicotine, which we know, as I said earlier, we know that 97% of the vape products we've tested contain high concentrations of nicotine, which of course plays a role in addiction, and that nicotine addiction can rewire the brain, especially among a young person who is still having their brain being developed. Campaign strategy number 2, the negative health effects, that vaping can lead to long-term health effects. Although knowing that you think in the now, we want them to know that the danger is real, that what you're doing now with your life can have long-term effects, that you're more likely to succumb to addiction and disease by engaging in something that is addictive and might be a gateway to smoking. So campaign strategy number 3 is the gateway. So looking at studies that show youth who vape have a heightened potential for long-term tobacco use, up to 4 times more likely to smoke cigarettes than youth who don't vape. So at a time when we know we've reduced the smoking rate, in this case smoking cigarettes among youth has been reduced dramatically in the last several years in Arizona, down to 4%, who say they at least use tobacco at least once in the last 30 days, for example. So they've made decisions around smoking. We want to remind them that vaping are 4 times likely to lead them back to that smoking behavior. So we've had that victory. We want to kind of repeat that message that got us to that victory and tie in vape products to that. And campaign strategy 4, the youth empowerment, looking at the campaign recognizes that today's social climate and the attitudes of today's youth encourage this kind of behavior. Empower youth to not vape by showcasing the strengths and freedom of those who choose to abstain. So I was thinking just the other day, actually, that my very first media interview in my career, which is like a few decades at least ago, probably before you were born, Abby, sort of, that I was doing a workshop on youth gang behavior, right? And I was just doing a workshop with youth and parents around youth gang. And some media showed up, and it was my first time ever exposed to the media, and asked me, why do you think youth join gangs? And being a real neophyte and being afraid of the media and being very nervous about that question, the answer that came out of my mouth was, well, youth often join gangs for the same reason that adults join Kiwanis clubs. I mean, it's like acceptance, it's like support, it's like my peers, I belong somewhere. So youth are at risk if they need to belong somewhere, and they're being enticed and being recruited into a circle of what they see as support. That they feel empowered in that behavior. So we want to empower youth, to have the efficacy, the self-efficacy to turn down those invites. So in the past, especially with tobacco, we've done a lot of work with youth on building those skills around being able to say no, about being able to say no and feel confident in that. So empowering the youth in a way to be, you be you. You don't have to vape just because your friends are. And we deliver that through our STAND coalition, Students Taking a New Direction. It's much more powerful than hearing me talk about it. So our campaign results, it's just since December 31st, New Year's Eve, we've launched this. And so the next slide will show us our results as of April 7th. So we're going back over a week, and this is the most recent results that we get in terms of the analytics from our social marketing. We know we've had just in a little over 3 months, over 52 million impressions on digital, social, and cable media platforms, broken down, the majority being Snapchat at 59%, YouTube 21%, and Instagram 13%, and that 75% of the participation on the Facts Over Flavor campaign have been performed on a mobile device. So this is very important to us, and this certainly mirrors what we are hearing in our focus groups, where youth are getting their messaging. And it's certainly not on TV. Very, very few youth just watch a lot of TV now. They might stream on their computers shows they want to watch, but they're on Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. That's where they're at, and that's where they're getting these messages. And the Facts Over Flavor, the average time spent is nearly 5.5 minutes. So for folks that have done social marketing campaign and you try to drive traffic, your audience to a website, in this case being factsoverflavor.com, 5.5 minutes for us it's higher than any other campaign we've ever done. When we do a tobacco campaign aimed at adults, we're happy to get them to come to our website for 30 seconds. Right now, we have a major chronic pain campaign that I'm participating in, overseeing with the health department as part of the fight against opioids. And we're getting 35, maybe a minute on our website, and we consider that a success. So when you're getting youth to stay on your site for 5.5 minutes and looking at your ads and then revisiting, and we know we have millions and millions of impressions, we feel like we're getting the output. We're getting the kind of response. What we don't know yet, and we won't know for a while, does that translate into changed attitudes and behavior? Are we seeing that we're having an effect on the trends of vape use? And again, like I said earlier, we don't even know where the level of vape use is right now because it's growing so fast. But we're very happy about the 5.5 minutes spent. So let's look at a few ads here. And we have some time, so we could look at there's a sampling of ads. We're going to show you some ads here live, Facts Over Flavor. And we can just, when your vape addiction can sink into you, if we go to the very top, so know what's inside. And we can just scroll down and come across any ad or just start showing. You should be able to click on any of these. Click on this. Teens who vape can get locked in. And so I would say before we look at any more ads here, what we do when we talk to kids, we have focus groups, we come up with concepts about what we want to do. So getting locked into a behavior was something kids talked about. And so then we start drawing up some concepts with the marketing firm that we worked with. And so the handcuffs, the smoke sort of performing, looking like handcuffs. So we get a concept of that, and then we go back to the youth. And we show them this kind of concept, and we see if it resonates or not with the youth. If they say like, "Oh, that's dumb," and we hear that kind of thing with whether it's adult or youth. You think I'm stupid, think that's going to affect me, then we just throw it away before we go too deep into our resources to develop that campaign. So seeing this on our website means it was part of our formative research, the very concept of being locked into a behavior. We came up with concepts and we retested it. And then we go through the channels of getting it approved at layers of government, and that takes at least a few weeks, if not more. And then we have it on our website. So we can go to another one here. This is a good one. And this actually site gets the most traffic of any ad.
You might think there's nothing in vape, but it can contain nicotine, which is dangerously addictive and attacks your brain.
So, of course, here in Arizona, seeing a snake come at you isn't something we've all thought about at one time or another. But when you vape, addiction can sink its teeth into you. So, it's interesting that when we first developed this ad, all the adults in the room, like myself and other folks from our bureau and folks from the marketing firm, we all love this, but we thought, well, that's us. But looking at the fact that it's the most trafficked ad in our set right now, it shows that the youth are resonating to it as well. Now, this is a very much more of a complicated ad here. So that was our very first ads, and that was simply getting at the imagery of there's a lot of toxins here. There's something, there's more than just the water vapor. There's a lot of stuff going into it without really saying what it is or what we think it is and having that disputed, just showing that this is a complicated thing and what's happening behind the scenes and the manufacturing of vape products is something you might want to think about. And this is, now before you run this, I would just say that we have some animated ads. And again, if you remember, we're looking at like the 10 to 13-year-old as well. So we're looking at an age group, and I've even showed this to my granddaughters, for example, that looking at even before contemplating even what is vape and using it, getting some messages out there. So this is an example of that. So again, the image of looking at vape products and then having the bubbles burst and then seeing the universal signs around poison and other things. Actually just getting into the young person's thinking about what's in vape. We can go to the next one. Any of these are, this is, that one's a pretty popular one, this is the vampire thing. So again, thinking of the 10 or 11-year-old who might be looking at that ad and that's drawing them into the website. Oops. I think in the early one we had lung disease. Now this is an interesting one. This is one of my faves.
Do you think your brain cares where nicotine comes from? Do Do you think your brain knows if you use a cigarette, spit tobacco, or vape? All your brain knows is nicotine is a drug, and e-cigarettes and vape can deliver nicotine to your brain. So whether it's cigarettes, e-cigarettes, or vape, the result is often the same.
So again, and that's direct messaging. We've been doing some work with Dr. Victor DeNoble around addiction and what it does to your brain. He's been a very effective speaker with our youth. So that's really coming out of his language there. Do you think your brain cares where nicotine comes from? So you've already decided that tobacco is bad for you. So do you think your brain knows the difference between a cigarette and a vape product?
I want to answer this question that's come in while we're up on this page, but can others, obviously we can go to this website to access these videos, but is there a way for people to share them on their social media?
I think there is a way. Certainly you can go to the website and forward that. There's not a lot on this website that actually brands the Arizona Department of Health Services, for example.
Okay.
So they're pretty universal ads.
Okay.
And I know through CDC, I think there's an exchange too where we can trade off ads and campaigns. I'm probably not the best person to be answering that question.
Okay. So I think that's right at the end. Okay, so we are going to take questions, but I do want to remind you that if you are seeking continuing nursing education, that you should go to cne.nursing.arizona.edu to fill out the evaluation form, and that link will still be on our Moodle page for those of you that are seeking those credits. Let's take questions before we finish. One question is, why are we separating smoking and vaping? If we replaced the word vaping with smoking in our statistics, parents would be in a panic.
Right. That's, in fact, that just ties into some legislation that's currently in the state legislature here in Arizona around defining vaping as part of the tobacco legislation. So I think depending on the results of that, then we'll be more free to interchange those words.
Okay. Can you describe, you've done this a little bit, but can you describe the process of using youth to inform your campaign messaging? Because you talked about having formative youth focus groups. And then you also talked about how they were used to kind of approve the videos that went on the campaign site. Right. So can you tell us a little bit more about that process?
Sure. So, I mean, basically, in terms of just in general, at a very high level, community engagement in public health it really, I think, requires us, it really underscores the importance of knowing your audience and getting them involved in what you're trying to do. So it's just not some people at the health department thinking this is what's going to work. And so we use youth in this case in two pathways. One is the youth who vape. Let's bring them in. We incentivize them to come in. They get paid to be in focus groups. Their parents often bring them to focus groups. And by the way, when we're in the focus groups, we have a chance to talk to the parents about attitudes and stuff. And we learn more about their own attitudes about vaping, why they vape, have they tried to quit, why don't they try to quit, those kinds of questions, and try to get inside the thinking of the young person that vapes. And then we also we recruit youth in all 15 counties in Arizona here around that are activated to do health messaging. So historically, they've done tobacco work. So youth talking to each other, peer-to-peer approaches, and getting local ordinances passed, whether it's a smoke-free park, Tobacco 21 in a local venue. And also we bring youth every other year onto the Senate lawn in Arizona. They have a big event. And the legislators, they can't run out there fast enough to get their pictures taken. with the youth. So what we know is that, and I often joke with our friends at Heart, Lung, and Cancer, for example, that youth have outperformed them in getting policies passed because everybody likes to hear from the youth. We've had youth get a lot of local policies passed that, quite frankly, wouldn't have been passed if it was just me, talking from the health department. So the legislators that like to listen to youth, and that's a real innocent message that's coming their way, but then youth talking to youth. I can remember when I was a young person, who did I talk to? Where did I get a lot of my information from? My buddies, right? Whether it was right or wrong information, that's where you get your information. So that I think the question becomes, then how can you put messaging? How can you use those pathways to get your messaging out? So youth talking to each other about not smoking or the nicotine addiction with vape products, that kind of thing is much more effective. So it's both from the very youth that are representative of the population that's using vape, in this case, that we're trying to reach, and also youth that are interested in being more active leaders in their local communities and acquiring a little skills and knowledge in civic leadership, how to talk to a local city council, that kind of thing. So if we can put a group of youth in front of a city council, we get a lot more laws passed than we do if we get the adults talking to city council. So from both angles, I think youth to youth, they're trusted, they're easier to listen to, and out of the mouths of vapes, I think that's the approach.
So is the majority of the work that the STAND students, is that what
students taking a new direction? STAND. Yeah.
Are those students mainly working on legislative type initiatives, or how do they spread peer-to-peer messaging?
Well, they're in the schools, and they're in the Boys and Girls Clubs, and they're in the local parks, and so that on the ground level, they mostly work at that level. They also work in the local city councils, for example, if they're wanting to get smoke-free parks approved in a local venue, and then they also work at the state legislature, just in terms of their presence and how they're feeding influence at the local levels that gets fed up through the legislative process. So it's sort of the short answer is all of the above, but it's mostly just getting kids to talking to each other. I mean, that's the basic purpose of trying to get messaging through youth, because that's where the influence is.
And is there any sort of social media initiative going on with them as well to put that peer-to-peer messaging on the social media platforms?
Well, they're certainly spreading the Facts Over Flavor campaign here.
Okay.
And then we're on the next month, or in June, we're having our annual summer conference where we bring about 200 youth leaders from around Arizona into Phoenix here. And they have a few days of skill building, communication skills, and having some fun and learning from each other what their challenges were, what their successes were, and building on that.
Here's a question. Other than youth input, how have youth participated in the creation of materials? Might that be an effective way to come up with material to be used?
How have youth participated in the creation? Well, certainly they see our ads in raw form, and they give us feedback on that. And the ads that we've developed have been in response to what we've heard in the original focus groups. So I think both at the originating the design of a campaign and then giving us feedback before we go final with the campaign, they participate that way. And now they participate by showing us that we had millions of impressions in just a few months. And so they're showing us that at least we're getting traction with what's out there. And we'll find out later if it's, like I said earlier, translated into behavioral change.
Okay. Has anyone tried to recruit celebrity advocates to produce a PSA through social media?
Here in Arizona, we have used statewide celebrities in tobacco ads. Just in the last year, about a year and a half ago, we did a campaign called Coaches About Coaching. And what it did is we got the professional and collegiate ranked coaches that are very popular in Arizona to donate their time to PSAs about their coaching philosophies. And in fact, here in in Tucson, we had Lute Olson did an ad for us, who's a very popular figure here in the Tucson area. And he talked about his philosophy of coaching and then how that was aligned with how the coachings at the Arizona Smokers Helpline, the quit line here in Arizona, how they approach their coaching. So getting people to quit using tobacco, how that was aligned with his coaching philosophies and how people perform in sports. And so we try to bring those together, and we went through some of the pro sports teams and college sports teams. And these were figures that may or may not be the celebrity ranking nationally, but certainly had a lot of traction here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. So looking at doing that. And we had messages coming out of the coaches, like one of the strongest messages was when it came to tobacco use, as one of the popular coaches saying, "This is one time I like a quitter," when somebody quit smoking. So that, very strong messaging around that.
Yeah.
So we have used that. I would say to be quite transparent in using celebrities. I gave some good examples. I have some not so good examples to give in the past where we've tried to recruit celebrities to do PSAs for us and they just wanted too much money. Even though it was a great cause, like getting kids to not smoke. We had some people that had a very high level celebrity status, wanted just to spend an afternoon doing a PSA, wanted up to $100,000. So we said, no thanks. We went a different way.
Are there other strategies that you guys have considered but that haven't been actualized, and for what reasons would they not have been?
They are. So the typical fork in the road for us, and I think a lot of other public health people can relate to this probably, is whether it's tobacco or vaping or any other kind of behavioral change around chronic disease prevention, is do you go graphic and show in a raw format the dangers, the end results of, say, smoking, or do you go positive, like showing what coaches at a quit line do? And then a lot of that is formed, through focus groups. Again, I go back to the formative research, but also then it becomes very political. I think, to what degree are we going to go, scared straight? At what degree do you scare the public into a behavioral change? Certainly, we've had some very delicate messaging around it. We're doing a lot of work right now. I'm doing a lot of work in Alzheimer's and working with caregivers and early signs of Alzheimer's and dementia. Very sensitive areas in terms of public education around early signs. To what degree are you helpful versus to what degree are you getting the worried well more worried? I'm old enough now where I forget where I put my car keys or something. Now, am I going to start getting more afraid because I'm hearing from the health department that there are signs of forgetfulness or memory loss? So it gets very delicate. So I think the answer to your question about a lot of times, we find we might have designs on a real graphic ad, and they decide that it's just too raw, or we're told by other people that it's just too raw. We just don't want to go there right now. So it's the ads that we run are paid for by tobacco tax dollars, so they're paid for by tobacco users. In this case, even with our vape campaign, but they're still public funds, and so we have to really vet our concepts up front. And so, a lot of times we wish we'd have gone more graphic, and we didn't. We know the focus groups might be leading us that way. At the same time, maybe the political climate is not.
Okay, we have two policy questions. One is from New Zealand. They're working with the New Zealand Ministry of Health in developing vape e-cig policy for making a standard age to purchase, but coming across the problem of the evidence on vaping products indicates they carry much less risk than smoking cigarettes statement. What is your best advice to approach lawmakers to show solid evidence that vaping is harmful to youth?
Well, we take the tact here in Arizona, which is why our vaping campaign is targeted for youth. That it's harmful because youth are still undergoing serious brain development, and it can have a real hazardous effect on the young brain. None of our messaging is geared towards adults. So quite frankly, we've kind of steered away from the harm reduction argument that an adult who vapes instead of using combustible tobacco, arguably it's less harmful. for that person to use the product. So for youth, and that's why we stayed with youth. So we talk about the brain development. We talk about the possible opening the gateway of 4 times more likely to be a smoker, which we know a lot of youth have already made that decision now, but not to be a smoker. So we really keep it in that kind of messaging.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also
it's a tough issue. It's a tough issue.
Yeah. A lot of the ads discuss how there's lead in the fluid, how there's other chemicals, but not a lot of details are given. Is that also related to your point?
Yeah, and we're testing for lead and other issues here in Arizona. Even though there will be national testing going on, for example, or global testing going on, we know that what resonates with our audience in Arizona is what comes out of Arizona. I mean, it's a real parochial approach, if you will, but that has more impact, with the audience that we're trying to reach.
Okay.
So when our state lab reports say, 97% of the vape products we tested had high concentrations of nicotine, that says a lot more to an Arizona population than me citing some study from the East Coast, even though that study is very rigorous and very valid. The messaging behind the study is very critical. And hi to New Zealand. I love New Zealand.
The other legislation question is, do you know what Arizona is doing with legislation to prevent the sale of flavored nicotine juice to kids?
Yeah, that's been suggested in legislation that at this point we're not sure is going very far. But I think it's important to note that it's on the docket, so it's being discussed, and I think a necessary step in sort of raising the public discourse around this is out there.
Yeah, and actually at the Western Region Public Health Training Center, we are hoping to have another webinar in a few months that will be focused on legislation for those that are watching and are interested in what states in our region are doing. So Hawaii is doing a lot to prevent the sale of flavored nicotine juices right now, and they'll be a part of that, I think, as well.
And I would underscore the importance there too of what we do here in Arizona in the public health arena is that we have a very, very healthy, productive relationships with heart, lung, and cancer and other voluntary groups that have a lot more freedom to advocate for specific legislation. So it's in partnership. So as a state employee for myself, for example, I can't walk across the street where the legislature meets from my office and argue for a certain bill. But I can certainly talk about the health effects and the public health impact that we're trying to reach.
So talking about studies that are looking at vape juice, that's what you call it.
Yeah.
Is there a way to find out what chemicals are in the various vape products? And I assume we're looking at, is there a website? Is there comprehensive information from studies?
Yeah, I think you should be able to find some just studies, Googling. And again, what we're doing here in Arizona is we're taking those vape products right into our state lab, which is really looking at what's in these products. So I would say that's one thing you can do at the local level, certainly at the state level, is bring them into your own state lab facilities. And
is there somewhere people can access the results from what you guys are testing?
Well, we'll publish, where our findings are. And we're working in concert here in Arizona with not only the state lab, but many school districts and the Attorney General's office. So it's kind of a consortium of folks looking at when vape products are confiscated to schools, also the Attorney General's office confiscating products that are legally purchased, and then bringing that into the state lab in samples that get tested.
Are there anti-vape presentations within school systems at the present time?
In Arizona, there are, it's hit and miss, to be honest. We're certainly working with a lot of school districts now. We know a lot of school districts have launched their own local campaigns and messaging, and there's organic sort of efforts within school districts where kids are speaking up on these issues. And schools are taking a stronger stand around surveillance and enforcement. And then looking at, of course, there's always a fork in the road working with kids around who vape. Is it the first, second, or third violation? Some school districts are approaching more from almost criminalizing the behavior versus, trying to correct the behavior. Certainly, we then lean more towards correcting the behavior and educating youth around this, just like we are educating retailers around how better to monitor their own behaviors around selling to youth. So I mentioned earlier that we had the Surgeon General here in Phoenix, and we had several school superintendents with us at that meeting with them. So certainly it's on the ground in schools across Arizona, but nothing organized across all school districts has occurred. And here in Arizona, we have many, many, many school districts that work independently. Mm-hmm. So part of the issue there is that getting a groundswell of galvanizing around what to do with this, knowing that you can't just put one campaign out there that all schools have to do.
Are you guys continuing to develop new campaign messaging videos for the site?
Yeah, that's a great question, because right now we saw a sampling of some of the ads that we have out there. Now those weren't all the ads. We have at least that many in the queue, so ready to go. So they'll come out, say, in July, August, that kind of thing. So we need, again, these are 10 to 30 second things that pop up on social media that grab the attention of youth. And if they go to the website, they're spending 5.5 minutes on the average. But we need to keep it fresh. What we call message fatigue or image fatigue happens real fast, especially among youth. So these ads will turn over, and there are other ads in the queue that have already been approved. Maybe they haven't been put on in our campaign yet, or maybe they're in another earlier stage of pre-approval. So we have our own assembly line of ads. In fact, I would love some of my very favorite ads are ads we haven't really fully approved yet to be on the air, but we keep that fresh. And then these ads that are appearing now will reappear, later in the year, because there'll be other youth just coming into this for the first time, right? So we'll keep that. We'll keep a constant turnover with that, and we'll see with their analytics. We get weekly reports from our marketing firm that we work with, and we know about the impressions, the length of time the vehicles are using, whether it's Snapchat or Twitter. We're knowing what ads are getting the best response, and if we see that begin to shrink, then we can change course, literally within a week's notice, and change up the ads, introduce some new ones, or just change that up, or take some ads off that are maybe showing signs of fatigue.
And do you also change the terminology in the ads? Like, do you use juuling instead of vaping?
Well, yeah, that's another great question, because the movement is happening so fast. Mm-hmm. Even some of the ads that we showed today show devices that kids no longer use. But when we developed that ad maybe 3 or 4 months ago, that was being used. And so, it's just staying current is a constant challenge. So both with the images and how we talk about the terms.
Okay. And someone offered a website that can be used to speak to, from the Stanford website. Let me see if I can share this with everyone. I'll see if I can send this link out to the audience. Otherwise, I will post this link on our Moodle site for everyone to access once this webinar is closed. So it looks like I can't click and select it. But it's about 2 minutes till our time. So the last question is about how you're evaluating the effectiveness of this messaging. And you've touched on a lot of that already with talking about how youth will review the videos and let you know whether it works or it doesn't work for them. Yeah. Impressions.
We have that input. We have that participation up front, and then we have sort of the process evaluation is that we know we're getting good traffic to the website. So we know we're reaching youth. But the ultimate outcome will only be if we see that the prevalence of vape use among youth goes down.
Right.
So, and that's where you, just like if you're waiting for the Youth Risk Behavior Survey or BRFSS or some other tool that gives you your in the end, did we make a difference? And so that's when you hold your breath and wait for the outcomes to come in. If we don't see that the use is going down, then we know we go back to the drawing board and stay on it. And like I said right up front, we don't know where the end goal is here. We don't know like how fast. We don't know if we did a time-sensitive survey today, what the rate would be. And so that's we just don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. Certainly the Surgeon General said he doesn't know. And he's very concerned about this as well.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Abby. I was happy to do it. Thank you. And thank you all for watching in.
Yeah, and everyone else, if you are interested in those continuing education credits or a certificate of completion, you can find that on the Moodle site once we close this window. So thank you.